Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us on the FareCompare Weekly Podcast. My name is Rick Seaney. I'm the co-founder and CEO of FareCompare.com. We're going to talk a little bit about one of my favorite things. I just got through using them, is airline frequent flyer miles. For those of you that don't have any yet or only have a little bit or have a lot, we're going to chat a little bit about those. And joining me today is our editor from the site of FareCompare from California, Ann McDermott. Hey, Ann.
Hey, Rick. Now, I'm going to be the counterpoint because I am not a particularly loyal flyer. I'll fly with anybody, so I do not accrue miles. So this is going to be new to me, and you're going to explain everything and why I should do this.
Well, the basics are pretty simple, right? So the first thing you do is you just sign up, and it's free to sign up. I think it's the key part is it's free to sign up on the airline sites. Now, when you have the airline sites, they'll all have their different frequent flyer program names. I have, gosh, I don't know, several dozen. I actually don't use a program, but there are also programs out there that can actually manage them. But mostly what you need is the one that the airline that dominates or the one or two airlines that dominate your particular airport. Because part of it is not only signing up for the ones where you're likely to fly, it's typically about also getting their airline branded credit card. So how you accumulate miles typically, unless you're a super frequent flyer, is through airline credit card miles.
Yeah, that's what I hear. And for anybody who's interested in just checking out the programs a little bit, we do have a list in our on the tips and advice blog, a list of all the frequent flyer mile programs, or not all of them. There's probably 10 million out there, but we've got a whole bunch, so you might want to cruise along in there and take a look.
Sure, and it's a couple things. So you have airline miles. You also have credit card miles where you can just buy an airline ticket anytime. In my case, I like to accumulate Starwood points, which I can then transfer to airlines, for example. So it can get complex. It's a hobby. There's lots of great sites out there. There's Flyer Talk. There's some good blogs. The Points Guy has a pretty good blog out there. There's several bloggers, and that's all they do, and they hobby this stuff. I just got back on a trip from Europe using points with my family, so it can save you tons of money. So one of the things that I like to do quite a bit of is to be sure that people understand that as you accumulate your miles, many of the programs actually expire your miles. So, for example, my daughter, who has, I think, 300,000 or 400,000 miles, she's saving up to take her friends to Europe when she graduates from college. So hopefully she'll have, several 100,000 more by that time. When she's doing that, I want to make sure she doesn't lose her miles. I think there's an 18-month window. In this case, the dominant airline is American Airlines at our airport. So you have to have some sort of transaction in your account. I just, for example, transferred miles from my Starwood account, 100 miles into her account, just so that she would have a transaction. Now she's good through 2017, for example. So be sure that you know your program. Some programs don't have miles that expire. Just know that a lot of programs have cash and points, where you can actually do partial miles, partial cash, especially hotel programs. So if you really want to get into the hobby of frequent flyer miles, it's worthwhile to take a look at some of these different programs and read up a little bit. There's some good entry-level info on our site. We also have, those other sites that I mentioned also have some good entry-level info as well.
Yeah, and we link to a lot of these sites. And one thing I wanted to say is if you are an infrequent flyer, as you pointed out, Rick, it still pays to join because maybe you can't, you will never amass enough for the holy grail of a free flight, a great vacation, but you might get enough for an upgrade, or all these airline sites have. They have a whole, like a shop online. You can buy flowers for Mother's Day.
Magazines. That's one way to have activity in your account too, is to buy magazines. There's also, I'll give you an example. I guess it was been about 3 years ago. They had a bonus program at American Airlines. My wife was complaining. She had retired, had used to have executive platinum status on American Airlines. So they actually had a business class fare to China that was ridiculously cheap with a triple bonus, and basically with one trip. And by the way, we basically had dinner in Beijing. She was able to achieve not only elite status but get enough miles for a couple of free tickets. So there's all sorts of ways. It is a really cool hobby if you want to get into it. You know, it's sort of two things. You could save up for that wonderful once in a lifetime trip to Europe or to Asia or to Australia. That's a great way to save for miles. Maybe it takes you a while to do that. Or another great way to use your miles is the fact that if you have a last minute ticket that's $600 or $700, it's a great time to potentially use your miles. One thing I will note is it's better to use your miles early on in the process. You don't want to hoard them. We have seen mileage programs, devalue where they, for example, require you to have more miles to get certain trips. So it's better if you go ahead and use your miles, if you can, within a relatively short window, let's say a few years. So don't hoard them for 7 or 8 years because they do devalue them.
Okay, say you do get this once-in-a-lifetime wonderful trip. Rick, I'm just wondering, do you happen to know 10 things you absolutely must pack?
Yes, well, I just got through packing many of those 10 things because I just got back from Europe about 3 or 4 days ago. That's why my eyes are like this. I'm still a little jet lagged. Um, but one of the things that always catches us is charging cords, right? It's plugs, cords, making sure you have it for different locations. I just got back from France. It has a different plug than the UK. Some plugs have all sorts of weird and wonderful international things, but the number one thing that you have to have in your backpack, and I always take a backpack along with me, is charging cords and an adapter, as well as some cash. Now, what I tend to do when I go on international trips is, as soon as I hit the airport, I almost always go to the ATM. If you go to one of the places and take actual cash and do it, the exchange rate's really terrible. They hit you pretty hard. I've seen it as bad as 10 or 15% in some cases. Usually, you'll just have a 1 or 2% fee if you use your ATM card.
And other things to bring. Of course, some of these are so basic, but your documents, like your boarding pass. Say, for example, you think, well, I've got it on my phone. What do I need it for? Well, as you pointed out in the talk about chargers and stuff, phones die, and they die at very inconvenient times. Another thing is, if you're going abroad, of course you will pack your passport. You know that. But make copies of it and leave it with maybe somebody at home, and maybe have you and your traveling companion take
Right.
copies of each other's.
Put it in the
And
cloud as well. I always have all these documents in the cloud as well, so that you can download them from any browser, for example, if you need them. It hasn't happened to me, but I've seen a bunch of. This was a tip actually that given to me by a flight attendant. They always take their documents and put them up in the cloud just in case. They're more likely to sort of leave them around. They're flying all around the place, all
yeah,
over the world. So, accidents do occur. And by the way, if depending on where you are and where you are, I've seen lots of pickpocketing and whatnot occur. So once you do pack those things, make sure you control them. We always have. It's kind of funny the way we just got back. It's like I had 2 kids. It's like mom always keeps the passports, right? And she's divvying them out. So she's got them in her special little location where we have passports. And when we go to the airport, when we go through, she's the one that's sort of divvying them out, and they all go back to mom. So mom's the one in trouble if we lose our passports.
yeah. Believe me, I can relate. Mom gets the passports. Mom gets all the stuff because mom carries a big purse, and that's why.
Yeah.
But and speaking of good big purses, that's where you can stick mom with your noise canceling headphones that you might want, with your possible disposable poncho, which is like $3.99 at CVS, a selfie stick, although be careful because Disney says no to these things these days.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just got off this trip. It was an 8.5 or 9 hour flight to Europe,
Oof.
and I actually got for my birthday some Beats Bluetooth headphones. So I had the Bluetooth headphones, and turns out they only lasted about 5 hours on the plane. So I ended up having to ask for earbuds because the only power outlet they had was the cigarette lighter version, so I couldn't actually plug in my thing. So it's also worthwhile to check out your plane and see what kind of powering connection, especially on longer flights, they have. In my case, I didn't even think to look, and I did ask the flight attendant on the way there for one of those. I did get that there on the way back. They didn't have anything to plug in, so the cigarette lighter type style, although hopefully they're going away on many of the aircraft, they're still around.
And we have a slew of other ideas on things to pack on the website, as you know, and including things like favorite condiments. One of our colleagues has told us that yellow mustard, in case you are in love with yellow mustard is difficult to find outside the U.S., so this is something that is always packed in that family's bag. But none of this makes any difference at all unless you can find a cheap flight. And to find a cheap flight, it's always helpful to know about the deal zones, and we've got one coming up that has a magic date.
Yeah, no, and this is my favorite time of the year, to be honest, right? So this is, in my opinion, this is the best time to fly. The heat of summer, and I live in Dallas, and we're in 100 degrees as we speak here, is about to be over in September, October, November. There's a very special date, August the 25th. That's the date when airlines assume that your kids are back in school and you're not going to buy as many tickets. There's actually some empty middle seats. There's some incentive to discount, and we see the prices drop pretty dramatically, both domestically and internationally. So that deal zone is for departures, not for purchases. You should be buying right now for departures August 25th and beyond.
There are a bunch of airline sales right now that were launched today. As we speak, it is a Tuesday, and that's airline sale day for many of the airlines. And many of them start August 25th. That's what the period that the sale fares are good for. And every time I look at these, I keep thinking, Boston and Hartford, and I'm thinking in terms of great fall foliage trips. This is the perfect time to buy.
It was kind of funny, and I was just, my wife and I were eating dinner last night. My daughter's taking driver's ed, and we're going, well, we just got back from Europe, and we're saying, well, what are we going to do for Thanksgiving, potentially? What are we going to do for the holiday season? So we're already starting to have that chat, kicking the tires, deciding where we want to go. So the first thing my wife says is, don't they have a new nonstop to the Caymans? And I'm like, it's sort of seasonal. I'm not sure they actually are going to have it for Thanksgiving, so we're already looking into that right now. So it definitely is time to that magic date. I just did about I guess 13 or 14 radio shows just a little bit ago, and all across the country, and it was pretty amazing. If you paid more than about $350 round trip during this deal zone, you were paying too much for your ticket. In a lot of cases, it was under $200 round trip.
I'm curious, did you find a lot of people want to fly in this fall?
Yeah, it's interesting, when you talk to the radio hosts and whatnot, some have kids, some don't, and but the ones that do are like, well, maybe I can sneak in a weekend here. Yeah. Maybe grandma will take care of the kids depending on how old they are. So it's definitely an awesome time to go to Europe as well. I mean, Oktoberfest is actually in September, so check that out. It's the most beautiful weather in the fall if you can get away.
And the magic date, again, is August 25th. And thank you very much, Rick Seaney.
Hey, thanks.